We had a really great Jiu-Jitsu session. What I like about Jiu-Jitsu is a full body movement, and you also work out the mind as well. And you really have to manage your breath because it's such an intense sport.
Welcome to Move, Sweat, Discover, the podcast where fitness meets self-discovery. Today, we are talking to Brian Lai, aka Primal Breathwork, a leading breathwork transformation and performance coach. So trained directly with Wim Hof, becoming Asia's first certified instructor in the Wim Hof method. Alongside the aforementioned, he has also collaborated with renowned leaders such as James Nestor, the best-selling author of Breath, and Dan Brule, breath coach to Tony Robbins. With his work featuring in Bloomberg, Vice Media, SCMP, Asian Boss Media, China Daily, TVB, and more, a warm welcome to you, Brian.
Thank you, Avi.
Thank you so much for coming today. Our podcast is all about movement and discovery, our journeys, where we've been, where we're going, what we've learned, what we're doing. And we started off our journey at a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class yesterday. Not your first, but mine. We'll dive into that a little bit later. But I want to start off by asking you if you can lead us through like 1 or 2 minutes of breath work to start us off, to kind of, we've all had a busy day. Whoever's listening might just need a little reset. Can we be treated to some of your work?
For sure. So I can guide you through just a quick exercise.
Yeah.
For those out there that are a bit stressed out or a bit anxious or a bit tense from work.
Yeah.
So one of the things first before the breath is to look at how your vision is as well, because we're talking about expanding our nervous system to the relaxed state, to the calm state, the parasympathetic state. So one of the things to do when you're stuck in the office and when you're stressed out in the office and you're staring at the screen for too long is just to pay attention to how your vision is. A lot of times when our vision is very narrow and we're staring at a screen for too long or a phone for too long, for example, that starts to put our nervous system in a state of stress.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we do to downregulate with breathing is also to expand our vision. Okay, so if you notice, for example, on a phone, just imagine that your vision is like portrait mode when you're staring at a screen. What you want to do is get it to a panoramic vision. So what you can do is so you can put your hand like this.
Yeah.
Okay, and just basically keep your eyes in the same direction, and then just wiggle your fingers and just begin to move your hand to the side and open up your peripheral vision. Get your gaze as kind of wide as possible. And then what that does is start to shift your nervous system to a calmer state. Okay. So that's one of the first things to do when you're in the office and you're a bit stressed out.
Yeah.
Okay. And the second thing you can do is start to regulate your breathing. Okay. So one of the exercises that I like to do is box breathing. Okay. So that's a very simple exercise that most people can remember. Okay. So it's the exercise that I used to do when I used to get a bit tense, a bit anxious.
Yeah.
So it's also what Navy SEALs use as well. So very simply, you breathe in through the nose and out through the nose, okay? And what you do is you breathe in for roughly about 4 seconds. You then pause the breath for about 4 seconds. You then exhale out through the nose for about 4 seconds. And then you pause the breath after the exhale for another 4 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. So for those out there listening, if 4 seconds seems like a bit too long, you can also do 3 seconds or 2 seconds, for example. But the key is to keep each of the sides the same ratio.
Yeah.
If it's 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, if it's 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, and you get probably like Navy SEALs out there that do it for a long time, they practice for a long time, and they might be doing 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds with each one.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll guide your listeners through, say, 4 rounds of this, which is usually enough to start to down-regulate the nervous system. Okay, so what we do is we start by breathing in through the nose. So breathe in through the nose, in, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, pause, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. Pause, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4. Pause, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Pause, 2, 3, 4. And that's 4 rounds of box breathing. So usually I'd recommend 4 to 6 rounds. It's generally enough to down-regulate someone's nervous system to a calmer state, and just do that, whenever you feel a bit stressed, a bit overwhelmed at work, along with a vision. And that should kind of keep your nervous system more at a kind of a neutral space throughout the day.
I love it. Thank you. Let's go to the start. Talk to me about how you got your start. I read somewhere that it was within your own journey with kind of anxiety and like burnout and mental health challenges that you kind of found breathwork. Is that correct?
Yeah. So at the time, I was actually at the end of a different career. So I was trying to make movies.
Okay.
So producing a movie at the time. And my whole life, I was kind of chasing those things, chasing like fame and wealth and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And when I kind of got a glimpse of it, I realized that when I saw the people involved, that they weren't really that happy, kind of miserable behind the scenes. And basically like what I had been aiming for in life kind of just shattered. And that sent me into quite a bit of depression at the time for several months. And it was during that time that I basically was back in Australia. I was at my parents' place at the time, and I was like basically locked myself in my room for several months.
Okay, wow.
And it was just one day, I just had this kind of voice in my head, this epiphany that I couldn't really control and change the things around me in the external world. Maybe there's something I can change inside. And that's when I started discovering these kind of tools. So it started with meditation. So I went to one of those 10-day silent retreats, Vipassana retreats.
Okay.
So that was my first experience ever with meditation. And after that, about a year after that, I discovered the Wim Hof method. I was just watching random YouTube clips one day, and I saw this Wim Hof documentary pop up, and basically everything this guy was saying about building mental health, resilience and strength was kind of everything that I needed at that point in time in my life. And as soon as I finished watching that documentary, that was in 2015, I basically went online straight away to search, how I can train with this guy, how I can learn from this guy. And I booked into his first retreat, his first program in Australia.
Yeah.
I think I was the first person to sign up, actually.
Okay.
And that was 2016 when I started training with Wim Hof. And leading up to it, I almost pulled out a bunch of times because I didn't realize there was so much ice bars involved. I thought it was just some sort of like mindset thing, some sort of breathing thing. But when I started realizing that there was all these ice bars involved, I was like really freaking out. And, I don't know how where you're from people are, but I know like Chinese people are very kind of allergic to the cold.
Yeah.
Very against the cold. So, but eventually I kind of knew that this is what I wanted to do. It was going to be good for me. So I stuck with it. And then 2016, I started training with Wim Hof in Australia, which absolutely kind of blew my mind as to what was possible within the human body naturally. And then I decided to continue learning from Wim Hof. So over the next couple of years, I kept training with Wim and eventually became certified. Like you mentioned, I think I was the first one in Asia to be certified. But at the time, I had no plan to be a coach at all in this method. I was running my businesses at the time. I didn't even know this could be a career. And what happened was when I came back to Hong Kong, literally I landed at nighttime, and then the second day I went out to meet some people for lunch. And then on the way back from lunch, this woman, I was walking through a shopping mall, and this woman jumped off the top and like landed, like 10 meters away from me.
Oh, wow.
So she committed suicide. And that was basically a bit traumatizing. But after I kind of got over that trauma, that was when basically I decided that, okay, I had learned some tools that could possibly help people in this kind of state. Because I don't know if you know Wim Hof's story. His first wife committed suicide.
Yeah.
So I kind of saw the parallels to that. And I never wanted to be a coach because I hated public speaking.
Yeah.
That was like my biggest fear. But this kind of seemed bigger than that. And so I decided to just offer these workshops to just teach people this method that I've learned. And I think you came to one of the first ones, I think. Yeah. That was in, I think, 2016 or 2017 or something. And the first workshop, I was expecting maybe like 3 people, 4 people to show up if I was lucky. But it was like sold out, like 30 something people. And then every other workshop after that just kept filling out. And then over, I think, the next year and a half or so, it basically took over my life. And I basically didn't have time to do anything else, and eventually became my full-time thing until now.
Yeah. And how did you mentioned that you didn't like kind of public speaking and kind of sitting in that space. How did you kind of switch your mindset, or, kind of what was the shift there?
I still don't like it, to be honest. So, but what I did realize was that the tools that I learned in breathwork, meditation and breathwork, I could use those and implement those tools to basically keep my nervous system calm. Before that, what I realized was that I wasn't breathing that well when I was, for example, giving a talk, and it would just push my nervous system more and more into that panic state. And before you know it, I was freaking out. But even the first year I was teaching, I would say the first 100 times I was teaching, I was still very, very nervous.
Yeah.
Like my first, I think maybe 20 workshops, I was like sweating, drenched just from the nervousness from doing the public speaking.
Yeah.
So I think, but after a year, there was one time, I think I was teaching at Pure at the time, a workshop there, and it just kind of dawned on me that I wasn't as scared anymore. And since then, it's just been a lot more manageable. But even sometimes I still get a bit of nerves before giving a talk, giving a presentation.
Yeah. How do you kind of combat that?
I just embrace it. You know, it's just kind of part of the process for
Lean
me.
Lean
into it, exactly. Yeah. And now I have several tools, more than just breath work now, that I can kind of prep myself with before I do it.
Yeah. I've been teaching as well for like maybe 8 or 9 years, and I still get nervous to teach. It's almost like this imposter syndrome in my head. But I now, especially in the last maybe 2 years, I really just lean into just doing it. If I'm scared, I'll just do it because it's probably good for me. It is good for me. It's like, it's how you grow, right? Did you find that there were any kind of cultural or like societal challenges when you were starting to do the breathwork stuff here?
Yeah, definitely. Even it's funny because even though kind of breathwork came from pranayama, which comes from the East, it had been largely lost in the modern society.
Yeah.
So when I started doing this, I really had to basically educate people first, like what this actually was. So I remember the first time, like this first few workshops that I did, I approached, I think I called and I emailed like probably about at least 60, 70 different places, and only a couple places responded, giving me a chance to do it. So back then, no one really knew what it was, and maybe 2 people had heard of Wim Hof.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got started, just from these couple places. And at the beginning, it was mostly people that were expats that had maybe in the fitness world or in the wellness world that had kind of heard about Wim Hof, and they were the ones starting to come. And it was only maybe about a year and a half, 2 years later, where I started to notice that there were more locals coming to the workshops.
Did you feel that there was a bit of a shift during the pandemic with kind of like people kind of seeking out wellness, well-being kind of practices?
100%. Yeah. I think during the pandemic, because, lockdown, people were stuck indoors and couldn't do their routines anymore. So people really were confronted with their own mind. And I think a lot of people were, for maybe the first time in their life, were going through, depression or mental health, issues or challenges that before maybe they had things to distract them, like their work or
Yeah.
going out with their social life. But when they were just kind of stuck indoors by themselves, I had to really kind of confront it. And I did notice that breath work really exploded during the pandemic.
Yeah. Can you share any like success stories with any of your clients that, for the breathwork kind of like really hit home?
Yeah. Like it's like one of the joys I get is when I'm educating or explaining this to clients and they just have that aha moment about how important breath is and how basically breath is linked to every system and every function of the human body.
Yeah.
And if you're not breathing optimally, then nothing else is going to be optimal. I guess
What is optimal breathing? Sorry.
Optimal breathing is a few different things. Obviously, it's much more complex than this. But first thing is that we should be breathing through the nose as much as possible, as often as possible. There is a time and place for mouth breathing, but most of the day, most of our lives, we should be breathing through the nose. So that's the first one. Second one is we should be breathing deep and a lateral expansion. So deep into the diaphragm with a kind of a lateral expansion. A lot of people, what they do is when they breathe quite shallow and they breathe into like a vertical expansion. So when they breathe in, their shoulders lift up, their neck tightens. And so they have this vertical expansion when they breathe, and it should be more of a horizontal lateral expansion.
Yeah. As you talk, I'm now trying to like mental check like what I do.
Yeah. So I think that comes with just, sitting at the desk a lot for a lot of our lives or at schools and stuff. And it just becomes this habit, this subconscious habit that we develop. The other thing is slowing down our breathing, but that comes with a deep lateral breath. So when we breathe shallow up here, it's going to be a faster breath because we're using the more shallow parts of our lungs, basically. And one of the other important ones that most people don't know about is the position of their tongue. That's actually very, very important. So there's basically where our tongue should be is basically should be sitting at the roof of the mouth.
Okay.
So for a lot of people, what happens is that it's actually dropped down, and that's called lazy tongue posture. And for the average person, that's how their tongue sits for most of their lives, and it's what leads to things like snoring and later sleep apnea and so on.
Yeah.
So it's very simple. I can guide the listeners through it, finding that place. So where your tongue should be sitting, okay, firstly, the tip of the tongue should be just right behind, above the teeth. But how you find that spot is you say the sound ta ta ta.
Ta ta ta.
Yep. So when you say the sound ta ta ta, you notice how the tip of your tongue touches a certain part of the mouth.
Yeah.
So that's where the tongue should be touching.
Okay.
Once you find that spot, you leave the tongue there. You then close your mouth, seal your lips. And then instead of using force to push the tongue up, what we do is you then swallow once or twice the air out of your mouth. And what that would do is that creates a vacuum. And that vacuum then creates a vacuum and then the tongue just seals to the roof of the mouth. And that's where the tongue should be sitting basically for majority of the day. So when you're nasal breathing, sitting at the desk, for example, most of the time, even when you're, for example, working out and you're doing like jogging, for example, that's where the tongue should be sitting. So it feels maybe a bit awkward when you first do it because, for most of our lives, it hasn't been in that position, but that's where it's supposed to be.
Okay.
So give it like maybe a couple of weeks, it will start to feel normal again. And for children, for example, it actually changes the development of the skull. So that the whole face shape actually changes if the tongue is not sitting in the right place.
Right. We were talking about your client success stories.
No, that's
right.
So I went on a bit of a tangent there. So one of the memorable results and the clients that I've had, still a close friend of mine now. She's moved to Singapore now, and that was Mel. And she was a cancer survivor. Okay. And but she had all these health issues still. And no matter where she went, she still kind of had these health issues. So she would like from her apartment, she would go to like a hotel, different hotels, and then she would still have these kind of health issues. And we did a type of breathing called conscious connected breathing. We did probably, I would say, 15, 20 sessions of those. And that is more the more spiritual side of the breathwork techniques. And so around maybe the 12th time or the 15th time session that we did, she kind of had this almost like this experience, this kind of vision, where she used to have, she used to be very religious. So she was quite, she was quite close to God, to Jesus and so on. And she had lost that faith during the last few decades. And during that session, she had this vision of, I think it was Jesus was in that vision. And basically the message, the download that she got was that she needed to pay attention to her faith again. And this sounds more like plant medicine than breath work. But when she started to do that again, she went to get her health markers tested literally, I think the next day. And they all went back to normal. And she went from, I think she was taking about, I think something like 6 to 8 antihistamines a day. So that's like 30, 40 antihistamines a week. She went down to about 1 a day after that, after this one specific session. So I think it was an accumulation of all the sessions that we did, but this was just like kind of a tipping point.
Right. You mentioned as well earlier before that there are occasions where one should breathe or can breathe through their mouth. What are those situations?
So there are times, for example, where you're just pushing yourself to the extreme. When you're exercising and so on. And if you want to kind of tap into like that last bit of the gas tank, then those are the times that, breathing through the mouth might be what we need to do. When we do, for example, anaerobic exercises, then a lot of times we burn out and we use the mouth to breathe. Also, for example, if you're swimming, then you obviously have to use the mouth to breathe. So there are times that we do and we can use the mouth, but majority of our lives, we should try to breathe through the nose as often as possible.
I have a lot of clients that say that they breathe through their mouth like during class, and there will be like a low impact, low intensity kind of session. And they said they can't control their breath through their nose.
It takes a bit of training because it's not just fixing your breathing mechanics, it's also the chemistry as well. Building up CO2 tolerance. So I live across the road from a running track in Happy Valley, and every time I'm taking a walk there, I would say 99% of the people running there are breathing through the mouth, and they should be breathing through the nose, basically.
I tend to find that I breathe in through my nose and out through my mouth, because I feel like that regulates the heartbeat a little bit.
I mean that can also work, because when you feel the need to start to exhale through the mouth, it's also because you basically need to dump more CO2 out of the system. So when you're working out, when you're warming up, for example, you might be able to maintain nasal breathing in through the nose, out through the nose. Then as you kind of ramp up the intensity, you need to offload more CO2 and you start to dump it out through the mouth. So in through the nose, out through the mouth.
How do you see the practice of breathwork as a tool for like personal transformation as versus like kind of the physical?
With into like how I see breath work is that there's this quote by Viktor Frankl, I believe, and it's there's a space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies your freedom. And the breath allows us to pause enough to give us that space, so we don't just react to all the things around us in this world. And when we don't just react to all the things around us in this world, then we have the choice in how do we respond. And the breath allows us that choice of responding in a proactive way instead of just reacting, which when you're reacting, then you're basically a victim to your environment.
Because it's such a simple thing. Like we need to breathe every day, and like you kind of don't think about the way that you're breathing, or like if it's correct, in through your nose, out through your mouth. And so I find it very interesting that it seems like such a simple thing, but it's actually super complex.
It is super complex. I mean, you have like a whole rabbit hole of like pranayama, where they spend hundreds, maybe thousands of years focus on breath techniques. You've got in Taoism, you've got 7 books just on breathing. So
Yeah.
it's a huge thing.
Yeah. What are some of the common kind of misconceptions or barriers, I'd say, that you kind of encounter when introducing breathwork to new clients? Because it can be quite a daunting subject. Yeah.
I think for, at least in my experience, it's been hard. People find it hard to believe that something as simple as breathing is impacting their lives so much,
Yeah.
their health so much. We tend to overcomplicate things in today's society. And when you say, okay, it's just look at your breathing, you can just dismiss something like that very easily.
Yeah.
But it's, there's so much more to that. And the science is catching up now.
How do you help them overcome their kind of skepticism or like their fear?
I start with something that they already understand or they already know. So I start within their comfort zone and just kind of, so it's different from client to client, company to company. So it's just starting with something simple.
Yeah.
Just by, just the simple day-to-day breathing, how, simple kind of tweaks in your day-to-day breath can impact your day. Again, one day leads to another day, leads to a week, leads to a year, and that can change your whole life.
Yeah.
It can lead to a whole new brand new behavior, new patterns. And when you also start to, the good thing about breathwork is there's a lot more famous people now doing breathwork.
Yeah.
And when you start to mention, oh, this person does breathwork or that person does breathwork, then people start to, oh, really? And then they start to listen.
So then how do you know, how would I know if how my breathing is impacting my life? Can you tell just by sitting here with me?
Yeah, you can tell a bit. You can tell basically just look at the basic things when they're breathing, if they're, for example, lifting their shoulders when they're taking a breath, if they're breathing through the nose or if they're breathing through the mouth, how fast they're breathing, their pace, if they're breathing deep and so on. And you can kind of see their tongue posture, if it's kind of dropping down. These kind of basic things you can kind of start to see just from observing someone after a bit of time. And just based off that, you can already kind of know, okay, where the dysfunction is in their breathing and what are the kind of at least the first steps to work towards. Obviously it gets a lot more complex than that, but these are the kind of the beginning things I would look for. You would start with these kind of simple assessments and then go from there.
Okay. And how complex do you get?
It's, it really depends on how far the client wants to take it. For example, some people they do, maybe just a handful of sessions and they go, yeah, that's what I need. That's enough for me. And then that's it.
Yeah.
And they've gained what they need to gain from me. Where there are other people that, they do ongoing training where they've done, 20 sessions, 30 sessions. And they just want to explore more and more and more and more. So it's really case by case.
Because there are, I was reading, some techniques that kind of unlock, trauma. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the girl before I mentioned, Mel, that's the techniques. That was one of the techniques we were using, which is rebirthing, which is so there's a few techniques. Things like rebirthing, holotropic breathing, transformational breathing, and those kind of breathing methods where they use something called conscious connected breathing. And that is basically where you do generally use the mouth for that style of breathing. And when you breathe in, it's basically nonstop. You breathe in, you breathe out, you breathe in, and it becomes this kind of almost a circular breath, and it's nonstop. And so when you do this type of breathing, what it does is starts to kind of, just like in therapy or something like that, it starts to peel back the layers. And then it starts to get to, blockages, traumas, and those kind of things that are stored within or suppressed within. And it gives that person a chance to process it and release it. So you might have seen these, for example, these ads that you see on, social media, which is you see people doing breathing in a room and they're yelling or they're crying and so on. So those kind of sessions are generally a form of circular breathing or conscious connected breathing. So but when you do see those kind of ads, I would say stay away from those ones because one of the ethical practices of this type of breath work is that stuff is private. It
Right.
shouldn't be used for marketing.
Sure. Yeah.
So
yeah.
when you do see those ones that are using those kind of clips of people releasing trauma and stuff,
Yeah.
I would stay away from those ones.
Yeah.
But the actual method itself, if you can find a reputable coach that can guide you through it, hold a safe space,
Yeah.
then I think it works.
Yeah.
I spent a month in Mexico with Dan Brule, and he's the breath coach of Tony Robbins and Navy SEALs and so on, learning this back in, I think, 2019. And we were just doing this practice like twice a day, every day for a month.
And how was that experience for you?
It was intense.
Yeah.
It was more like a spiritual kind of experience
Sure.
where the things that you kind of release, the things you see, it's hard to describe.
Yeah, I mean, I had an experience in Bali, of all places. A healer was recommended to me, and I just come off a retreat. So, I was kind of feeling super zen, and I was like, healer, of course, why not? And so I went along. I had no idea what to expect. The friend gave very specific instructions. He was just like, give the money and just wait and just go in and don't leave your phone, all this kind of stuff. Anyway, so I went in and she started talking to me. Why are you here? And I didn't tell her anything. She didn't have any information sheet on me. And she read me straight away. We started doing some breathing exercises. And then eventually, before I knew it, I was kind of hyperventilating or, doing quite aggressive breathing techniques, yelling, crying. It was just incredible. And it all kind of related to some sort of trauma in my childhood and all this kind of stuff. It was intense. But yeah, that experience has kind of stuck with me for forever kind of thing.
Yeah. Those ones are, I mean, you can compare them to drinking ayahuasca, for example, having those kind of experiences. It really kind of taps into deep into your subconscious where, you have these kind of blockages or you have these kind of traumas that are stored there that are maybe suppressed or that we never had the opportunity to process during that time when we were younger. And these type of breathing methods are one of the ways that we can tap into it and allow it to process.
Yeah.
And when we process it and we release it, then we can move on. We can move forward.
Yeah. Let's change the tune. Let's talk about movement. What has your relationship been with movement throughout your life?
With movement, growing up in Australia, I've always been quite sporty.
Yeah,
I grew up playing tennis and soccer and these kind of things. And as I got older, I think from my 20s onwards, I've been mostly doing martial arts as my main form of movement and exercise.
And what are some of the things that you've learned about yourself through movement over the years? Through
movement, I would say, I guess back in Australia, I was a bit too young to think about those things. But in my journey with martial arts, it's I can see the way I fight. It's kind of a reflection of how I deal with life. How I deal with stress, for example.
Yeah.
Like in Jiu-Jitsu, for example, when I would spar as a white belt, when I started, I would, for example, if I was stuck in a bad position, I would try to escape once or twice. And then if I couldn't, I'd just give up.
Yeah.
And then that was kind of a mirror to how I would deal with stresses and challenges in my life back then.
Yeah.
And now over time, it's not about one or two big movements. It's about kind of step-by-step adjustments along the way, and using technique as well. I can see that how I deal with life now is with stresses and challenges. It's also similar as well. Is I don't just give up after one or two tries. I would kind of try more and more and more and find a way out.
Yeah. How did you get into jiu-jitsu?
I got into jiu-jitsu after I got injured from boxing. So I was training boxing at the time, and I had just signed up for my first fight, but then I got injured. So I was injured for a few months, and then after the injury healed, I decided, okay, should I continue with boxing and striking, or do I switch to grappling? And then I decided to step out of my comfort zone and try jiu-jitsu. And like your first session, it was just really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I had a girl, I think the same size as your partner from yesterday, just in like 4 or 5 minutes, just destroy me, just choke me out 4 or 5 times. And I was completely helpless.
Yeah.
And which I didn't think was even possible, you know, given the size difference, the power difference, and my years in striking. It was a very, very humbling experience.
Yeah.
And from there, I was like, okay, I need to learn this.
Yeah.
And that's how I started.
Yesterday I had no expectations as we were talking off mic, but it was very confronting. Like I enjoy all types of movement, and I especially love moving in new ways. So it was great to kind of experience, but as we were kind of saying again off mic, like what I see of jiu-jitsu on like social media, TV, whatever, is exactly what I experience. It's just like rolling around on the floor with another person, which, like we said, is normally what you do in the bedroom.
Exactly.
So it was, it was interesting. And I enjoyed kind of being out of my comfort zone and challenging myself. What do you think was something that you learned about yourself in yesterday's session?
In yesterday's session, it was a beginner session. So it was kind of the things that I hadn't really done for a long, long time. So I guess it kind of taught me patience.
Okay.
To kind of go through those repetitive things that I'd done so many times when I was in a low belt.
Yeah.
And just to learn, like even in those basic drills that I hadn't done for so long, that there are still kind of refinements that I can make.
Yeah.
And it's not to overlook these small steps.
Yeah. Going back to breath for a second, as a coach, do you think that you learn more from your students than they learn from you? It's a sentiment that a lot of trainers that I've spoken to over the kind of years and through the podcast have kind of have expressed.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely things I learn from students as well. I think it's like a 50-50 kind of thing.
An exchange, yeah.
Yeah.
So in yesterday's session, we didn't spar all too much, but towards the end we did. What is something that you learned about me?
I like that you kind of embraced something different, challenges, step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And you just lean into it, which is great.
Yeah. I learned that you are strong. When we started like sparring at the end, you were also, you were quite like a natural guide and a natural teacher. So, kind of guiding me through what I should be doing. Like you led me through some of the movements. And I feel like that's obviously goes hand in hand with how you are, as a coach. But the biggest takeaway I had was that you are strong. I was like, how do I get out of this? Yeah. Would you say that that's an accurate kind of assessment with how you are as a coach?
Yeah, like I've actually never coached jiu-jitsu, by the way.
Yeah.
It's I like to share what I've learned. I like to share the things that have empowered me, and I think that's the way I coach and I teach, is just sharing the things that I've learned in my journey. And I continue to be a student. I keep learning all the time with new teachers and new masters and new experts.
Yeah,
pretty much every year.
Yeah,
and whatever I kind of gain from them that I can share with my students is what I do.
And breathwork for fitness, like how do you integrate? What are some of the tools for performance?
Yeah. So breathwork for performance is, if you look at breathwork in a framework of there's some modern breathworkers that put breathwork in this frame of gears, like in a vehicle, like a car, from like gear 1 to gear 5. So in terms of how you would kind of look at breathwork for performance, when you understand that, then you can start to, shifting to, for example, shifting to first gear, to second gear, to third gear. And when you want to recover, you want to kind of down regulate, you want to go down from fifth gear down to fourth or third gear and so on.
Yeah.
And so when you understand this kind of framework, it allows you to kind of micromanage your breath, your heart rate, your nerve system a lot more in a way that the average person aren't aware of. And because of that, because you can learn to manage these kind of things inside, it just kind of adds a whole new dimension to your workout.
And then specifically for like your own kind of practice, like how do you kind of integrate that? Like, are you constantly checking yourself? Like, am I breathing correctly? Or
Yes. Like, it's not a conscious effort. I spent kind of years now, but it took maybe about a few months to really tap into my breath, consciously being aware of my breath, to develop a breath awareness. And once you develop that skill, your breathing just becomes almost like another sense that you're aware of. So I'm constantly aware of my breathing, just like I'm aware of like my body temperature, my heart rate, and so on. And I just kind of I instinctively know like when I'm breathing poorly and when I need to realign my breath.
Yeah. So how can I like kind of incorporate breath work, I guess like seamlessly into like my daily routines kind of thing? And like, instead of like, rather than, in the morning, I will meditate, but are there any kind of like exercises that like one can do throughout the day?
Right. So one of the things that in breathwork that tends to be overlooked because it's not the sexy side of breathwork, is breath awareness, and that is simply just developing an awareness of your breathing patterns throughout the day. Because if you're not even aware of how you're breathing throughout the day, it's difficult to know when to apply the certain exercise or tools that you've learned. So what I recommend firstly to develop breath awareness is just put a reminder on your phone, maybe like 4 or 5 times a day. And when these reminders go off, just check in with your breath. How am I breathing? Am I breathing through the nose? Am I breathing deeply in a lateral expansion? Where's my tongue sitting? Is it sitting at the roof of my mouth or is it dropped down? So check in with your breath throughout the day. And as you check in with the breath throughout the day more and more, it starts to become a natural thing. And then when you, for example, start to realize that, okay, maybe I'm a bit stressed out, for example, and then you can use something like box breathing to kind of down-regulate your nervous system. Or if you are, for example, after work and you're kind of fatigued and you're tired and you're kind of a bit burnt out, then you might want to do an up-regulating breathing method, maybe something like the Wim Hof method, for example. And you do that to kind of boost yourself up in preparation to do the exercise or the session that you're going to do. So breath then becomes pretty much like the remote control to your state.
Yeah. Where do you see the future of breathwork heading?
The future of breathwork is one of those things that have just been around for thousands of years and it's been lost. So now it's kind of re-emerging and being rediscovered. So I can see that breathwork, there are kind of tools and technologies and gadgets that are kind of merging with breathwork. So maybe that's what the future holds for breath, is more in synchronicity with technology. But in terms of kind of I think it's just what was lost, what was forgotten is just going to come back into people's lives, into the mainstream.
Something that is in the mainstream at the moment as well is like contrast therapy.
Right.
We're going to talk a little bit about that, and you've done your ice baths. How does that kind of go hand in hand with what you do?
Yeah, so I did sauna earlier today, and I think contrast therapy is amazing. once again, I don't think it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
These are not things that are, ice bars are not the thing for everybody. So it's one of those things that for these days, there are a lot of physical benefits. If you look at like Andrew Huberman, he talks a lot about the benefits of cold exposure, of heat exposure, and so on. But if you go on the flip side, you look at Chinese medicine, they will say that cold exposure is a no-no. Okay, so you just got to find what aligns with you. So for me, these days, I use contrast therapy more as a tool for mindset to kind of just become comfortable with the discomfort. So I work a bit with, you probably know 10X Longevity.
Yes.
At the Upper House, Pacific Place. So I do some stuff there, and I would do a bit of contrast therapy there, and I don't do it as frequently as I used to, but I would say that the times that I do contrast therapy, it has made me a lot more resilient in terms of dealing with stress, even dealing with the heat in Hong Kong. You know how the heat is pretty brutal during summer.
Yeah.
When I'm consistently doing saunas, I've noticed that I'm a lot more resilient to the heat in Hong Kong.
Okay.
It just doesn't impact me as much. And it's the same as ice bars. When I do ice bars or cold exposure a lot more, the cold just doesn't really get to me. Like I can probably count with, maybe one or two hands at times I've had to wear a jacket during the winter in Hong Kong this time.
But also, it's never very cold here in Hong Kong.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, we're going to kind of almost wrap things up, but we do a lightning round. Go to questions. So just off the top of your head, don't think too much about them. Go to sweat. Go to workout.
Jiu-Jitsu.
Obviously. Go to treat meal.
Treat meal? Okay. I've recently become vegetarian, so it's hard to find a place.
Okay.
Pizza.
Pizza. Where is a good pizza?
Little Napoli.
Oh, where's that?
In Wan Chai.
Okay.
I think they were like a Michelin-starred pizza place, and it's the best pizza I've had.
Right. Nice.
Even compared to Italy.
Oh, wow. That's a tall order. Why the decision to become vegetarian?
It was this path I'm on in India that I do this meditation, specific type of meditation, and that was one of the commitments I had to make. That I had to become vegetarian. Yeah, and that was about 3 years ago. Okay, so I've since given up meat and seafood and eggs and so on, and it's it's been quite a shift, quite a change.
Did you find it challenging here in Hong Kong?
It's challenging to find places that serve good vegetarian or vegan food. So I mostly cook myself. Yeah. I was vegetarian for a number of years, and I always 90% of the time I was making my own meals. Yeah. Go to life motto. Becoming comfortable with the uncomfortable. Love it. Yes. Go to stress reliever. Jiu-Jitsu. Okay. How many times a week do you practice? These days, honestly, not as much, maybe about 3 times a week. Okay. But when my work is not that busy, then I would try to get at least probably 5-6 times a week. And is there like a competitive aspect to this? I used to compete. Okay. But I also got injured quite a bit. So these days it's not the top of my list to compete anymore, just because I don't want to get injured as much. And I just train for fun now. Yeah. I asked you off mic, or I mentioned off mic that it's not a very aggressive sport, or it doesn't seem like it's aggressive, because it's quite it seems quite choreographed in a beautiful way. It's when you get to competitive level, it can be quite aggressive. Yeah, because people are literally trying to choke you out unconscious or snap your limbs, which is the whole point of jiu-jitsu. Right. So in a competition kind of level, it's you're dealing with that. Yeah, I mean, yesterday was probably the nice introduction for me. Go to travel destination. I'm going to Norway in a couple of weeks. Nice. I love Norway. But close to Hong Kong I love Thailand. Okay. Any particular destination in Thailand? I love Khao Lak. I love the beach areas. Yeah.
Beach is my happy place.
Yes.
Go to morning routine.
Meditation.
Go to evening routine.
Gratitude.
What are some of the things you do to practice gratitude?
There's some of the things I just basically just slow down my breathing, and I just try to think of maybe 5 things that I can be happy for, grateful for.
Yeah.
No matter how the day's been.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things. It's like a muscle to train. It gets easier and easier, and it's not easy for some people, I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I find it just gets easier. And the reason I do it actually first thing in the morning and last thing before I go to sleep. And the reason for that is because during those first 10 minutes when you wake up and the last 10 minutes, your brain waves are actually in alpha brainwave, which is the brainwave state of like Zen monks. They take 20 years to get to that state. So naturally upon waking, first 5-10 minutes, you're in that state. So it's almost like a direct pathway into your subconscious. And it's a great way to like set intentions, do gratitude and do those kind of practices.
Yeah. I like that. Go to self-care ritual.
I would say meditation.
Go to music playlist.
Music. These days I listen to a lot more like mantras and those kind of things these days.
That was on your Spotify Wraps, the top one.
I mean, I love like hip hop, for example.
Yeah.
That's something I was listening to De La Soul the other day.
Oh, I love it.
I love De La Soul.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Go to book.
Go to book. I love the Tao Te Ching book. I also love The Alchemist as well.
Okay, yeah. And do you have a go-to breathing technique?
Breath awareness, really. That's what I usually use. Just being aware of my breath. But if I had to choose one method that's helped me the most, because I suffer from anxiety for so long, I would say box breathing.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
I'm going through a mentorship myself. I'm being mentored this year for 13 months, and it's teaching me how to really really achieve goals in life. So that's what I want to. I need to prove it to myself this year first. But if I'm able to, and it does what I think it's going to do, then that's what I want to implement into my work, is just helping people, starting with the wellness world, is really allow them to chase their goals, chase their dreams. Because as you know, in Hong Kong, most people kind of teaching breath work or teaching yoga or these kind of things, it's usually like a side thing. They have a full-time job doing something else, and this is a little side passion thing. I want to help them transition from that to like a full-time sustainable thing.
Yeah. You have retreats? Did I read somewhere?
Yeah. I do retreats, awesome retreats we want to do them around the world, but we are doing one in November in Khao Lak.
Okay.
And it's not just breath work, but we really try to, the motto for that, the principle for that is, I don't know if you've heard this, I think it takes about 400 repetitions or something like 40 or 400 repetitions to kind of learn something. But when you are playing, it takes about 4 repetitions. So what I really wanted to encapsulate in those retreats is we play. So you're learning things, learning breathing techniques and all these different methods and tools, but you also put them out into the nature, and we just play. We have fun. And I think that's the best way to learn.
How do people find you?
Either website or Instagram is Primal Breathwork on Instagram, or primalbw.com on the website.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks, Abby.
I feel like I have a lot to learn from you, and I'm going to be stalking you on Instagram and maybe come to one of your retreats.
Fantastic.
See you soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on Move, Sweat, Discover. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.